here's what I'll say. I think if we can get away from a police system, I think that would be great.
Welcome to Getting Curious with Mitch. This show is brought to you in part by the Aggie Radio Podcast Network. On this show, we talk to people who are passionate about what they do and figure out what makes them tick. Today, I have my good buddy, Trevor Delker, on the show.
How's it going?
Welcome, man. Me and Trevor go way back to the days of elementary school, but I know one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I'd say around the election, I definitely identified as conservative.
Yeah.
Right? And I think since then, I saw the Social Dilemma documentary, and I kind of realized how much of what I'm seeing could be in just like an echo chamber. And there's like, I feel like if you pick a side, it's like you automatically hate the other side. And I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
And so I'm still like right-leaning, but I don't identify that way. But I wanted to have you on because I feel like you have a lot of, you have a lot of beliefs politically that maybe a lot of conservatives don't quite understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so, I mean, would it be fair to say that you were like pretty, like kind of leftist in a sense?
Yeah, I was trying to develop kind of an overarching thing, but like, yeah, if we want to get straight to the point, like leftist, independent, don't identify as a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an independent.
Yeah.
And I'll probably stay an independent for the rest of my life.
But just kind of like left-wing progressive.
Left-wing progressive, yeah.
Yeah.
I think those words identify me pretty well, yeah.
Awesome. And I think that's great, and that's why I'm so excited to talk with you about all these different things, because a lot of, most of the people I'm surrounded by are conservative, and a lot of the things they say on healthcare and stuff that I'm sure you're passionate about, is very logical to me, and it's like, okay, that makes sense, and I can tell why these people are scared or upset with or happy about different things. But then I feel like there's a lot of those people will see people on the left wing as like, holy crap, these people are snowflakes, they're unemotional, they are not, they're ignorant. Yeah. There's you know how polarized things are.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously we're good friends. And, I still share a lot of conservative ideas, but I know you're a logical, unemotional person.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Like I'm sure you've obviously read things and looked at, data, and there's a reason you believe the things that you do. There's a ton of people who voted for Biden, in Utah.
Absolutely.
Like the big, not the majority, obviously.
People in our circle and people, as people know, in Utah, there's a big population of LDS members.
Totally.
And there was a movement. There was kind of a counterculture within the church that were like, no, we're not voting for Trump. We're voting for Biden. And there were people like trying to sign off on that, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I think this equation of, I guess like you have to be like conservative and like Mormon, like those two things are synonymous, or not just that, like Christian or kind of like devoutly religious kind of stuff. Not saying that that's a bad thing or anything like that, but I think there's a tendency for it to lean that way because I think those factions of people have always voted conservative.
Right.
Because they like traditional values and stuff like that.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And so, for example, and I know this is one of the things you're interested in talking about, especially the war on drugs. Yeah. Because I definitely kind of grew up with that conservative belief, like especially like when there's talk of legalizing weed. No, just because I'm a devout member of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that like, okay, like, no, that's not legalized weed. Like, I don't agree with that. Like, morally, like, I don't want to smoke it. And when I get married, I don't want my kids to smoke it. So I was like, I'm not in favor of that. But then I heard of this idea of like Portland and other states that are decriminalizing it. And I heard the idea behind it where it was like, okay, if we decriminalize it, because there's already a huge black market for drugs, right?
100%, yeah.
Like cartels, trafficking, it's all up there. And there's a huge demand for that drug. And I heard the idea that, okay, if you legalize it, you get rid of the black market, you're creating jobs, you're creating taxable income, right? That's going to help the economy. And you could be funding institutions like rehabs.
Absolutely.
That could help people.
Schools, education.
Yeah. So when I saw it from that perspective, that made a lot of sense to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm very much so, as Joe Rogan would say, like, not married to my ideas.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty progressive idea, right? Decriminalizing drugs. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And I haven't looked at a ton of data, but at least that idea I find really interesting. And I still lean kind of to the right. So
yeah, I think people have a misconception about what drug use means about a society. I personally, I grew up with the same kind of ideals as you did. And I was staunchly against, weed or alcohol or taking part of like illicit substances just for my mental health. And I think to a large extent, like growing up, you should not be exposed to things like alcohol or marijuana as a developing brain. And I think it's age 26 is when people say that your brain is developed, but even after that, your brain is still developing.
Sure.
So it's never like set in stone. But I always had this concrete idea of like, I don't want to have this affect my cognitive abilities in the future. But I think as far as the war on drugs, like we need to be looking at this as a public health crisis, not a criminal or like a criminal activity type of thing. Like I believe people that use drugs have some sort of mental trauma that they're trying to escape from. Other people like to do it just recreationally, and I think that's also fine if done under proper safety precautions and things like that.
Like alcohol or cigarettes.
And the thing is, people are always going to do these. They'll find a way to get these drugs. And like you said, like there are cartels that will, and behind the scenes, there's a bunch of shady, can I swear or no?
Try not to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
or else they won't broadcast it in the schools.
You're good. So like, it's kind of just shady stuff behind the scenes that if we had it legalized, we know exactly who's buying it, where the funds are going, and we can fund rehabilitation, and we can have like safety precautions. Like if you're a heroin addict, we don't want you to get bad needles and die, or like, get HIV or whatever. If you come here, like you can get clean needles, whatever, and we won't be advocating for it. But if we're there, we can be like, hey, maybe you should check into rehab. Like, have you thought about, XYZ solution to this problem? Have you gone to therapy? Like, what are your options? Is this really the lifestyle you want to live?
Yeah.
And I think that is the most important thing, is the stigma, the shame behind drug usage is actually what perpetuates it in the long run, in my opinion. But I think a lot of studies back that up as well. So that's kind of how I view things, is through the lens of shame. But on top of that, I think kind of coming around to also racial inequity. Disproportionately, blacks are criminalized for the same drug usage. And I think there's some drugs, I think marijuana especially, whites use more than blacks. People do their own research. I'm actually 100% not sure about that. But from what I know currently, there is disproportionately more African Americans going to jail for the same crime. So if we can wipe that out, that just kind of lifts a lot of people out of poverty, because once you're into the criminal justice system, if you get into the prison industrial complex, kind of like that is very hard to get out of, because once you go to jail and you get out, who are you surrounded by? Probably the same people. You could fall right back into the trap. And you can also, it's really hard to find jobs, so your mental health is not great. If this drug was providing some sort of mental relief, what is the logical answer? It's like a lot of people are like, well, screw this. I don't want to try if I have no chance of getting a good job or whatever. So I'll just start taking drugs again. It's very counterintuitive and counterproductive, in my opinion.
Right. No, and I agree 100%. I've talked to I don't have a ton of friends who have gone through the prison system and whatnot, but from the people I have talked to, from what they've told me, and this could be anecdotal, but I don't think it is, that it's not very rehabilitative, like people who go in, especially if it's for drugs.
Right, yeah.
Especially if it was like possession charges, like they're using, not just selling.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's not really rehabilitative. It's
No.
like, there's one guy I used to work with who went to jail for a couple years, and he said that, that there were guys in there who just like could not wait to smoke their next joint when they got out.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sure there are classes and stuff that people take, but I'd imagine there's so many people in the prison system that they just can't support like rehabilitation for everyone in it.
So here's the thing. We live in a society, America imprisons the most amount of people of any country in the world. That's a fact. And what does that say about our society is that we have for-profit prisons. And Biden actually, I think 2 days ago, signed some an executive order to stop for-profit prisons. So if you go to prison, you are like, people are getting paid for you to be in those prisons.
Mm-hmm.
So your labor, whatever you're producing, whatever, it goes to the people that are running the prisons. Like, I think that is absolutely morally reprehensible to have a system where you're profiteering off of other people's suffering instead of trying to get them help and getting them integrated back into society. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that you didn't message me or we talked about this, but I feel like it is pretty current. And a lot of my conservative friends I've spoken to are kind of like, they're scared about it, just because they've seen, there are a lot of executive orders going through right now, and a lot of them are going to incur a lot of national debt, and a lot of people are kind of concerned about that.
Sure.
That we're going in.
So conservatives have a kind of default position within our just legislation to be deficit hawks. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but that just means that as soon as like Democrats get into power, be like, oh no, how can we pay for XYZ? We're the budget, like, how are we really getting that money? But as soon as Republicans get into power, they have ample money to fund wars, ample money to socialize, Wall Street, like when people are out of work or struggling. And for the 2008 financial crisis, what happened there was a bunch of Wall Street speculators trading, being reckless, and they like were shorting these housing stocks, from my understanding. And what happened is they lost. Is like there was a bubble, and there was a crash, and who got hurt? It was ordinary American people. It wasn't the Wall Street people. So that is the kind of thing that upsets me, is like, especially with the national deficit and things like that, is like Republicans are really focused on who is donating to their campaigns through super PACs. Campaign finance reform is something I'm very passionate about. We need to get money out of politics because I don't believe corporations are people, and I don't believe that money, especially because, the concentration of wealth is always going to be at the top, at least right now, how the system is set up. So whoever has the most money has the most influence in our politics. Like you look at Bloomberg, Mike Bloomberg from the Democratic Convention. I don't know if you
I haven't
remember
followed
him.
it a ton. I heard the name quite a bit though.
So he was a spoiler candidate. He came in. He has billions of dollars, and he just spent an insane amount of money just so he could split up the vote between Biden and Bernie. Right. If that tells you anything about the structure of our politics, it shows that money controls everything.
True.
And if you can divert attention away from Bernie as someone who's Bernie's a socialist who wants to regulate the market and put things into favor of working class people, of course you're going to get up there and try to bolster, ideas that would benefit the rich. And I still have the problems with Republicans. I have the same problem with Democrats.
Yeah.
But to say that, so Trump increased the national deficit more than Obama did during his presidency. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. And that's 8 years. Obama was in office 8 years. But granted, right? Pandemic. we had to get stuff out, right?
Yeah,
right? I'm not going to be hypocritical there. Like, and the thing is, right now is Biden's trying to pass like a $2 trillion climate change thing. That's what's happening. He took a lot of notes from Bernie Sanders' campaign as far as like the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think there is every single time Republicans get into office, they cry about like deficit, but they have plenty of money to fund wars and fund their billionaire donors. It's just hypocritical.
So here's what I'm curious about, because I can see as well. Like, yeah, I'd imagine, both sides are going to be spending money.
Yeah,
I think that's a given. I think the question that's going to be on my mind, and I feel like this is a pretty conservative concern as well, like with all the topics we could dive into, like the universal basic income, or getting rid of student loans, or whatever it is.
Right.
The one argument that always comes back to me, or that like people will tell me, is like, well, that's just going to be more taxes. Like, that's what I hear.
Right.
And I feel like that's still something I want to understand, because that logically in my mind is like, yeah, it is going to be more taxes.
So
I just want to hear.
Here's the bomb. Ready?
Okay.
Ready? They're not going to tax you. This is my problem. Like, I don't know if you saw the meme. It's like, if you live like this, don't worry about Biden's tax plan. Where it's just like people like lounging in like a bunch of like Cheetos and stuff. And that's exactly the point, is like Bernie had a wealth tax for people that made over I want to say $250 million. So you're not even touching like the wealthy, like relatively wealthy class. Like, and under Bernie's plan, which was way more progressive, a lot more taxes, it did not touch working class people, and it did not touch middle class working people. Yeah. Those people do not deserve to be taxed. There's no reason, especially with the middle class shrinking, with the increasing income and wealth inequality in this country. So with that being said, yeah, that argument is completely debunked just by the fact of like reading what's in the proposals that Biden and Bernie are taking. They want to empower working class people. Republicans do not want to, like, as much as they say they're about the little man, like, there is little, at least not Trump is, because Trump kind of acted as this like pseudo-populist, this pseudo working class hero. He was born into wealth. Like, he had so much power from his father's business practices. He inherited a bunch of money. He got money from the government because they know his family was wealthy, was astute, whatever. So they were like, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money from taxpayers to build a business. And what did those businesses do? They failed. So, like, what? I don't understand the argument of this at all, because it's not going to affect you, especially if you're in a lower tax bracket.
Sure. So, just in kind of recap, the reason it's not going to affect most people is because it's going to be the 1% that's going to be funding all these things.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, well, and I honestly kind of like that. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I can also see, like, and maybe this is just because I've heard a lot of people express this, that like that scares some people, because a lot of people will feel like that's moving somewhere towards, like,
where do you
I don't want to say communism, but like I guess like that's what people will say, like it's moving towards some kind of communistic, like, make everyone equal type ideal. But I can also see, like, yeah, that would make sense, because these people can afford to pay that, and it would help a lot of people.
I think people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what socialism or socialistic subsidized programs actually do. And for the record, I want to state that Bernie's platform, as like progressive and radical the right likes try to spin it as, is very modest compared to like European countries. In our legislature, like in D.C., we don't even have representatives that are like, Bernie's like the only socialist except for now people coming in like AOC, Cory Bush, Jamal Bowman, people that just got elected to the House, which is great. I personally think the more representation, the more differences of opinion in economic systems is great. To say that we're going to turn into a communist country anytime soon is completely absurd. And that's coming from someone that's a progressive who does like a lot of socialist ideas, but does not agree with any communist ideas.
Sure.
So, like, I don't think people even understand what the differences between communism and socialism is. I mean, communism is total state control. Socialism is more state control, more regulation. And so what does that mean? So it's like healthcare. Healthcare is no longer privatized. It's a public sector, which it should be, because people profiteering off of people's suffering is morally reprehensible.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So this free market thing is great for a lot of things. I totally agree with that. But as far as like healthcare, as far as housing, as far as certain aspects of our economy, I think it's completely detrimental to the well-being of average Americans. And I think, I mean, specifically, like, what was your question about communism then? Because
I don't know if I want to dive into communism. I just know a lot of people will kind of blatantly use that as like an argument that like, oh, like Bernie Sanders is a communist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like I don't think so, but I feel like a lot of people will just lump all these ideas into like, oh, this guy's just crazy, you know?
Right.
And I don't think that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
He's absolutely not. And I just want to state this for the record, is the Republican Party as it stands today, the GOP is a far right party as far as like other countries are concerned.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party is a center right party in most countries, especially the European, the Nordic countries. Like those countries, like I said, like they have representatives that are communists and socialists. We don't have that necessarily. We only have socialists, but they're very mild.
Yeah.
Like we are dominated by capitalists who want to not regulate everything, like leave everything up to the free market, which is absurd and it's destructive. And we're seeing now what happens when the 1% takes advantage of the working class.
Yeah.
Have you seen the GameStop? This is a primary example of why I love Bernie Sanders and I love Reddit and the internet.
Yeah.
It's democratized. It's democratized basically everything. Like the internet is anarchy. You get on there, it's a bunch of memes. It's a bunch of like you can make someone who's in a position of power look absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, 100%.
You can make Trump. Oh, so many memes.
Dude, Trump memes, yeah, for sure.
Trump memes.
No, the one that perfectly described what's happening that I saw yesterday was it was this guy who was shooting another dude on a chair.
Oh, Eric like Andre?
Yeah. It was like the billionaire shooting like common peasant.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next one, it's like the billionaire is like, why don't poor people just invest?
It's so funny because these billionaires will cry and be like, yeah, why doesn't the poor just invest? Or, like, if they were smart about their money, like, they wouldn't know how to do it. And guess what? People are smart. That's why they bankrupted hedge funds over this. That's unprecedented. That's more effective than the Wall Street protest, like Occupy Wall Street, which is a huge movement.
Well, I saw there's an interview, you probably saw it too, of the Barstool president that was ranting about this.
Yeah.
And he was, what did he say? I just forgot, but he was like, what was it? He was just saying like how big of a criminal act this is, because it's like when the opposite happens and the poor are winning, they don't just shut it off, like it's not in the rule book, but it's like now they can just like, the rich people will have the power to just turn off these markets when they're losing.
That's what I'm saying. It's completely rigged. And what Robinhood did, Robinhood released, and now today, last night, because there's so much power, like I talked about, like the democratization of the internet, where people were like, no, this is the most blatant example of you rigging the system against everybody else.
Yeah.
And you have people, you have Goliath, you have Elon Musk, you have Ted Cruz, you have Donald Trump Jr. siding with AOC. What does that say about our politics? What does that say about Wall Street greed? I mean, it could not be painted any more clear.
It can't be.
Like
100% criminal.
It's completely disgusting. And Wall Street speculators have no bounds. Like the stories I've heard, I mean, they're all anecdotal. There is no like statistical analysis. Excuse me. They show that like these people have a blatant disregard for just average people. Like they have egos, they're completely reckless, and they actually believe they deserve the amount of money they have, and they don't, because average Americans, cleaners, people that work at Amazon, they bust their butts every single day, going to work and earning like slave wages. Yeah. And I know that's kind of a hyperbole, like kind of a punch to the stomach to say that. But there's a common kind of consensus, like especially within the faction of the left, like Jamal Bowman, who say the same thing, is like it's wage slavery. Like $7.25, especially in the state of Utah, that's not, you can't pay anything with that. Can't. Are you serious?
Like a 14-year-old should be making that, you know.
And then you go to college and you're deeply in debt if you don't have rich parents. Like I personally am in like $30,000 of debt. I know what the investment I took out of it. I'm glad I went. I've learned so much and it's benefited my life immensely. But that doesn't negate the fact that I am behind a lot of people because I decided I wanted a higher education. Yeah. Which should not be the case.
So I want to jump into this too and hear what your thoughts are, is because the conservative standpoint makes a lot of sense to me. Minimum wage, right? There's talk of raising it to $15 an hour. And you've kind of touched on it a little bit, that yes, people should find a job where they're making, not freaking $7.25.
Yes.
Like that's a joke.
Yeah.
But the one argument I hear and makes a lot of sense to me
is it the inflation argument?
Yeah, if you're going to raise the minimum wage, it's going to force a lot of mom and pop shops to have a larger payroll expense, and people could lose a lot of jobs or be forced to let people go because they can't afford to have them on.
Right.
Like I don't believe, I'm sure there are a lot of companies, like I don't know exactly the facts on Amazon, but I'm sure a lot of people will just give the lowest price, pay the lowest price they can when they could afford to pay people more. Yeah. But I'd imagine like a lot of people are paid what they're paid because that's what the company can afford to give them.
I disagree with that. Especially like Amazon is a perfect example. Jeff Bezos, I don't know how much, like I think he doubled his wealth. I don't know if that's true. I know he made an immense amount of money over this pandemic.
Yeah, he's definitely rich.
And these people, I mean, I was working at Amazon. I know what the working conditions are. I've spoken to these people. I know exactly what they do. They monitor. They try to accelerate people's productivity. It's very oppressive. You only get like a small amount of break, and then you're right back on your feet. In your work, you're walking about like 11, 12 miles a day. Like, that's pretty crazy in and of itself.
Yeah, you're working hard.
Amongst, moving boxes or whatever. And people are like, but Jeff Bezos works so hard. He deserves all that money. He deserves like $170 billion. Are you out of your mind? Like, no one in this country should have that much wealth, period. I completely disagree with the notion that, if you start a company and you reap the benefits off of other people's labor and you exploit them, that like, and you're basically just doing like managerial work. And a lot of these people are, what's the word? Kind of like putting it off to other people. What's that called? Anyways, but like, yeah, like Jeff Bezos.
Are you saying outsourcing?
Outsourcing. That's okay. I could not think of the word for whatever reason. But he's outsourcing to other people to do his work for him. I mean, the whole idea, I don't know if you've read the 4-Hour Work Week. I think it's the 4-Hour Work Week. It's by, I believe it's Peter Thiel.
I've heard that. I've never read it.
But it's basically about that premise of like, you can get so much money, or you can maneuver the system so much that you have other people doing the work for you, but you're making all of the wealth. That's absurd. It's rigged against ordinary working people, and it makes me deeply depressed, especially because this work is degrading of the soul. I mean, you go to work every single day for a company that doesn't care about you. They don't give you good health benefits. They don't give you, I mean, you get hazard pay. Oh, an extra $2 on your $15 for risking your life. Like, COVID is a big deal. Like, we've lost over 440,000 people in the United States. 440,000. And some of these people are people that are on the front lines, risking their lives. They should be making way more money than what we're paying them.
Right.
Because they're actively risking their lives just so people can get, like, you know, can get, like, furries in the mail from Amazon. Like, I just...
So here's, I guess, what I want to pin down, because I can see, like, how big corporations like that, like, obviously you have a lot more margin where they could, you know, raise wages.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, afford to do that. I that makes a lot of sense to me. But I can also see the concern for, like, smaller businesses.
Yeah,
or if they are, like, mandated,
absolutely.
like, you know, your mom and pa shop, you know, the local Mexican restaurant or something that has to now mandate, you know, a $15 minimum wage.
Absolutely.
Like, that could put them out of business.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I don't disagree with you, Mitch, at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think as much as Republicans talk about how much they love small businesses, they're exploiting small businesses by funding these huge corporations that are putting them out of business. And Amazon is selling their own products. What they're doing, so this is a great example. There's a website that had to do with, like, diapers, and they're selling diapers for a pretty low price. They're getting a lot of sales. But what Amazon did was they just lowered the price immensely because they have that amount of money to really
undercut
the expenses. And so they put them out of business. Because they created their own products. That needs to be regulated. Like, you have these Goliath companies. You have like Comcast, you have Amazon, you have Google. All of these things control so much of the market, and that's why Bernie's point about the oligarchy, which means just multiple people holding a mass amount of wealth, control everything in the society. And because they can pay for their politics. You know, if they want to put someone corrupt into power, they can, by just, like, giving them money, be like, hey, just don't tax me, please.
Yeah.
Like, that's rigged. That's so rigged. And so hopefully that answered your question.
Right. So I think just looking at this idea rationally, your thought is that larger corporations that have a margin large enough to really afford to pay people more should pay people more.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because, like, why, like, they should, you know, like, there's... If they don't, like, that's greedy.
Yes.
Right?
Can I give you a statistic?
Sure. Before you just to recap that. So larger corporations should, if they have the margin, be able to pay a higher minimum wage.
Yes.
But smaller businesses shouldn't have that same mandate if they can't afford it.
Here's what I'll say. I think there should be enough regulation that these small businesses are getting profits from those big companies. However you want to regulate it, there needs to be some way that the extreme amount of wealth that's being produced by these big companies is being put into small businesses in some form of, like, a loan or some form of, like, restructuring. I actually don't know enough about, I'll completely admit my ignorance of how that would actually even play out.
Yeah.
But I believe that's entirely possible for us to regulate these big companies and prop up small businesses, because small businesses is what makes this country great.
Yeah.
Is what makes innovative things. Like, for example, like Tesla. I posted this huge thing on Instagram yesterday. I don't know if you saw it or not. But what happened was retail investors, or, like, ordinary people that invested in Tesla, they were right. All of the hedge funds, like, betted against Tesla. And Tesla is one of the most innovative, if not the most innovative company in the U.S.
True.
And it's doing great things for our environment, for public safety. like, I can't imagine what this world would be. I mean, our country would be like if we didn't have Goliaths like Elon Musk creating things that are truly innovative in our country. So, yeah.
Interesting. And I think this will segue perfect into the next topic, which is a universal basic income.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that that's maybe part of the logic. Well, I think before we dive in, what's a universal basic income for those listening that don't know or haven't heard of that?
So, universal basic income, from my understanding, has been an idea around for quite a while. I don't know. I can't give you an exact timeline, but these ideas have been perpetuated like by the likes of Martin Luther King, who wanted a universal basic income, and now it's being championed by people like Andrew Yang, who is super innovative, super creative. But the reason why UBI is becoming more and more popular and people like Elon Musk support it is because the jobs that we have are being lost to automation and outsourcing. So people are out of work. There's not a lot of jobs. And so people, and especially the jobs that are available, are really low-paying jobs. So the idea is if we give people $500 a month, which is actually very reasonable, and it doesn't raise inflation, which is the most important thing. You can not like socialism, whatever. You can be a capitalist and still enjoy the idea of UBI. But fundamentally, UBI is kind of a socialist idea. It's taking money from large corporations and large stuff and putting it into ordinary people. And that gives people a kind of a level of security where they're able to do more things that are more creative, that they are able to spend time with their family. They're able to get mental health treatment because there's a huge mental health crisis in this country right now. I mean, there was a statistic that said 1 out of 4 Gen Zers were contemplating suicide during the pandemic. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. And the reason why is because their prospects are so minimal. And I understand people are hurting. And the best way...
Prospects meaning like jobs?
Jobs, education, families. I mean, this is what I don't understand about conservatives is like a lot of people propose that they care so much about families, yet people can't start families because they're so financially unstable. And that's not to no fault of their own. Like, I know people that have, I mean, this is anecdotal, but this is happening all over the country. And I wish I had some statistics, which I probably could find maybe after this is over. But just people, like, I don't know, like it's really hard for me to look at, like, this kind of idea of starting a family when, like, no one can really have the means to even really provide for themselves at the moment. And as long as things keep going at the trajectory that we're at, people are not going to be able to start families. People are going to be destitute. They're going to be depressed. They have no meaning in their lives. And then they go to jobs like Amazon, which is soul-crushing. Yeah. And so one of my favorite authors right now who I'm reading is called David Graeber.
Okay.
There's a book called BS Jobs, but it's like actually the swear word. But it talks about how a lot of the jobs, at least 40%, at least in, I think, European countries, I think like 35% in America, believe their jobs are BS, meaning they don't think it's just busy work. Like, we're preserving the system because we think, people should be working like a certain amount of hours, when it's really, it's putting things through a level of complication and bureaucracy that's not needed for, it just makes things less efficient. Capitalism, since its invention, is supposed to make things more efficient. That's why we get automation and like AI and things like that. So the idea is if we can get people a basic amount of money, they can have enough money to like pay rent or buy groceries. And people, it's been shown when these things have been implemented, people spend it on those essential needs. So it's a no-brainer to me that we should have some sort of UBI system.
Yeah, because there's two aspects I want to talk about. This is like obviously how it could work, and also like should there be stipulations on like who gets it, if that makes sense.
No, and that's one of the things that I love about it so much is that everyone gets it. Even if you make $1 billion, you get $500 or $600 a month. Completely even playing field. And so that gives money to people. I mean, during the pandemic, I think at least 70% of Americans believed that relief checks should go out. They believe that people should get direct payments, which I totally agree with. And since then, it's growing in popularity. UBI, I think it's has a 52% growing of people, Republicans and Democrats, who support UBI. So I mean, we have people's approval to get these things done. So why are they not getting done? It's these legislative hurdles, that's a whole other topic.
I'm sure, yeah. That's a whole mess. But I think the fundamental idea of how that would work, so everyone would get it.
Yes.
And then it would work because, like we just talked in the last case with Amazon, there's large corporations or just people in the top 1% that have all this disposable income.
Yes.
That would be able to fund it.
Yes.
So I feel like a lot of people may not be considering that and will think that, it's just going to be more taxes on the middle class.
It's not. No, yeah. That's the great thing is it's not. And it doesn't cause inflation, so there's no losing with a UBI system, which that makes sense. Yeah. So.
But and just to play devil's advocate, I could also see people saying, well, there's just going to be a lot of freeloaders, people who are just going to live off of that and not contribute to society.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I work 30 to 40 hours a week. My rent is $500. That's not even including utilities.
Yeah.
So that check would just go directly to rent. You need to eat. You need to pay for things. You have bills. You have finances like tuition, like bills, trying to start your own business. All of those things. Yeah, it just creates more space for the little guy, which I think is the best thing. Yeah.
So the idea is that the reason there's not going to be freeloaders is because that's not enough that someone could live off of.
Right. Correct.
But it's enough that would help provide the necessities
of
life.
And don't get me wrong, I think there may be, but I think there's just such a level of cynicism of people believing people are just going to be freeloaders.
Yeah.
I think people want to work. I think work is such a part of the human psyche that's so important to have a purpose in their life that I don't think people would just give up, working because they get a $500 check.
Well, literally, if you don't work, you're gonna die.
Absolutely.
I'd say no matter how depressed you are, you're either gonna die or you're gonna go to work.
Yes. Yep.
There are people, who are blessed with family financial support, but at the end of the day, I've been in spots like that before. It's you do not want to go to freaking work, but it's dude, if I don't go to work,
you're out in the streets.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna lose the lifestyle I have. No one can be a freeloader their whole life.
No.
If there is, it's very extreme, anecdotal that.
Absolutely, and
the anomaly.
But the thing is too, if people were using that money to invest in stock, they're doing the exact same thing that the billionaires are doing. They speculate. That's how they retain their wealth.
Yeah.
Is that they make bets on Wall Street. If those bets go well, they make a lot of money. And they don't really do a lot of work. But that's how our system fundamentally works. So that it doesn't make sense of the argument that but if they invest it and they don't work, blah, 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 they're freeloading. But it's a lot of these billionaire people have outsourced their duties to other people through bureaucracy and aren't providing much to society or creating a lot of innovative things. So yeah, I think that argument's really weak.
Okay. And I want to switch gears here because this is another thing that's just been on my mind personally and I think is really relevant with the things that happened over the summer. I mean, obviously we were both in North Carolina during the riots and everything there, protests. And I think that's something that's been on the mind of Americans. And I know, at least for me, just for the record, I hate racism.
Yeah.
I don't believe I'm a racist person. I mean, I serve my mission in Africa. I lived there for 2 years. Like I have nothing against white people. I think people who are racist, like that's awful. Like I do not agree with that at all. But I did find myself like conflicted with the Black Lives Matter movement at times, because like I agree with the phrase that Black Lives Matter. Like there is racial injustice and that needs to be solved. But I think I felt tentative to like when they did the Blackout Tuesday and you post the black thing. For whatever reason, I was like scared to do that. Not because I'm in support of racism, but like because I was going to be identifying with something that I don't know if I agree with 100%, if it's more than just fighting racism.
Right. I think what people need to understand is Black Lives Matter is I think the biggest civil rights movement ever to occur in American history. So, I mean, and there is a lot of loaded things, but I want to really state that there's different chapters of Black Lives Matter across the state. It's not like one uniform thing. And it's definitely not some like socialist communist thing. It's a social movement.
Right.
And fundamentally they want like police reform, which I absolutely agree with. And the treatment, I mean, and I really want to state this going back to what you said earlier. You used the word riot, which I don't take offense to, but I want to state that all of the like protests that I attended in Raleigh,
that's right, you were there,
completely peaceful.
Yeah.
Absolutely peaceful. And one of the most moving things I've ever seen. It changed my whole perspective on a lot of these issues. I mean, I was pretty big advocate for BLM before that, but with seeing it, especially like the blatant segregation of just like certain like aspects, like I think like here there's a covert racism, whereas like in North Carolina there's an overt racism. And what I mean by that is like people in the South, they're not scared to tell you that they're racist.
Yeah.
Here people will treat you nice, but in the back of their head they don't want to associate with you.
Yeah.
So it's covert, which I think is both are reprehensible.
Yeah, either way it's bad. True.
But yeah, I think it's really sad that it did disappoint me, frankly, that a lot of my conservative friends were not going along with this social movement, because it seems so obvious to me. Like, I know there's a lot of people that are like, but all lives matter, but that's completely missing the point of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is like, yeah, but all lives don't matter until Black Lives Matter, because Black lives, like people, African Americans are dying all the time. Like the mortality rate for coronavirus disproportionately affects African Americans. Like there's so much oppression out there, like especially for these communities. Like why add another layer by just like not participating in a very, I think, very agreeable social movement? Like
totally.
But
no,
I get the apprehension, because there's been such a Red Scare starting from World War II. Well, no, like Vietnam type era where we were the capitalists, we were the good guys, and we invaded Vietnam. By the way, we lost.
we got our butts kicked.
Yeah. But the thing is like we're intervening in other people's affairs that we should absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different topic, but hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm just going to be 1,000% honest, just because I know if I'm feeling this way, other people feel this way, and I really am interested to hear your view, just because I know you think rationally. Like with the whole defunding the police and stuff, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't that part of the BLM thing?
So here's what I'll say.
I didn't read up on it.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
I think that because there's a lot of nuance to this that needs to be unpacked. Bernie Sanders did not agree with defunding the police.
Yeah.
That's huge. What does that signal? He wanted more funding for police. He wanted more training. He wanted racial bias training. I agree with that.
Okay.
Right? But at the same time, I also believe community can be super effective, and we can divert a lot of funds from the police to helpful social programs. Instead of calling the police, we can call social workers. like, because a lot of these things are like de-escalation things rather than, you know, sending a cop with deadly force. You know, you don't know what kind of stability these cops have. A lot of them probably have some form of like PTSD. And so it's just bad news for, I think, generally everyone. But I can see both sides, and I honestly agree with both sides. You could go either way. You could fund it more, or you could defund it.
Yeah.
So,
because I think where my hang up with it is like, if you were to defund it, like I can totally see the benefit of hiring more social workers, and there's definitely, I think, a need for those things, and you know, for sure more of that. You know, actually like improving the system, not just enforcing the law. But I think I'm also feel like that's more of like a long-term goal, like for the long-term health of society. And a lot of times you need cops to be there in the middle of the night when someone's breaking into your house, you know? And I think, and I could be completely wrong with this, but I felt like the BLM movement was associated with just getting rid of police entirely. At least maybe that's just the echo chamber I was in.
yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that kept me from posting on like Blackout Tuesday, for example, because I didn't want to come off like I was in favor of getting rid of police. But I'm 100% against racism.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I want to say this. I have family members that are police members. Do I think they're fundamentally bad people? Absolutely not. Do I think they do a lot of good? Absolutely. Actually, one of my uncles received an award from the NAACP,
Wow.
National Association of Colored People, for his work. And there are good cops out there. And I don't want to... This is the thing that's really hard for me, is the right does this and the left does this. Like, it's totally understandable why you see the extreme. Like, the people that are advocating for police abolishment, those are anarchists.
Yeah.
Right? Those are radicals. Whereas, like, I don't think all Republicans are Proud Boy neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the average person is not a neo-Nazi or an anarchist.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a negative association with anarchism, and that's a whole other topic. There's a lot of prominent intellectual thinkers that, like Noam Chomsky and David Graeber, who unfortunately passed away, who I'm reading. He's an anarchist, but he believes in equity for like everyone, but not a centralized government like communism, which is it's a libertarian version of like, it's not communism, it's like a libertarian version of like, I would say like socialism.
Uh-huh.
And I agree with some of the tenets of kind of an anarchist point of view, but as far as like abolishing the police, that's not happening anytime soon. Sorry, it's just not.
Yeah, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, do you feel like that should happen? Getting rid of the police, like, because you're very progressive, right?
Yeah.
So I just like, do you think eventually like we should move away from having police?
Here's what I'll say. I think if we can get away from a police system, I think that would be great. I don't think it'll happen in our lifetime. I mean, I will fight for progressive movements until I die.
Sure.
But I think as far as like being able to take care of our own people, I think we can all democratically work together and plan so we can have like safety nets without police. I think that's entirely doable. And I don't think that's off the realm of possibility. But I mean, I totally agree if you disagree with that, but that's something that's been on my mind a lot recently.
Right. And because I'm just really open-minded to it, because like I think the way I feel about it right now is it's just like, I feel like if you were to just get rid of the police, it would be like the purge.
Yes. Here's the thing.
You know?
It's like people say abolish the police, but we don't have an infrastructure like for a safety net once it's gone.
That's what I'm saying.
You have to plan before you get rid of the thing.
That's what I'm saying.
And it's like people don't think about that. So the rational person is like, yeah, we can't do that just like right away. And so I'm suggesting is like, no, it's not going to be right away. It's going to take years and years of
because there's got to be something better to replace it with.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where a lot of, you know, people I know who are conservative, they just hear, get rid of the police. Like, of course that's stupid. Like, yeah,
it's
just
very face value.
Just like, okay, yeah, like one of the main reasons we have government is so that we can enforce laws, you know, and protect people,
right?
You know, and have some structure. But I think a lot of people miss is that why people want to move away from police or whatever is if they want to find a better option if there's one out there.
I don't know if this is a very good relation to or comparison to what you just said, but I mean, a lot of libertarians talk about, like everything kind of being legal, like leave it up to the market, whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of conservatives too, they're like, yeah, we should have guns, and I'm pro Second Amendment, 100%. I think people should be able to have guns, protect themselves, especially since I've seen the violence and the kind of radicalism on both ends. I'm like, yeah, I should probably be armed.
Facts, yeah.
But oh yeah, so my talking point was abortion. Republicans are all for everything of like the government not controlling everything until it comes to that, which I have a huge problem with. And here's the thing, like, we don't have to get into the weeds about pro-choice or pro-life. I personally, my stance is I'm pro-choice, but I don't advocate for abortion. I don't think people actively should get it. I think they should use all the different ways of doing it before it resulting in abortion. But I also think until we start taking care of our people, adults in general, like that's a lot of the rhetoric on the left. It's like, yeah, you care about babies, but you don't care about average Americans who are suffering right now. So how do you expect you care about this, but you don't care about just like average Americans? Like you care about a fetus, but you don't care about a grown person like dying because they can't afford health care, blah, 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 blah.
Sure. Hey, and before we go down that rabbit hole a little bit, I feel like I need to say it as far as like the police thing goes.
Yeah.
Just like for the record, people watching, like I'm 100% for police. Like I love police. I'm grateful for them. They've risked a lot and protected a lot of people this year, and I'm grateful for them for sure. But I hopefully those watching can see that like there's a rationale to both sides here with that, and I think people are too quick to just say, oh, we need to get rid of police, and of course that's absurd, but they miss the point that the reason people are thinking that is one, they wouldn't do that if there wasn't a better viable option.
Absolutely.
But obviously, police right now is the best option we have, and quite frankly, they probably are underpaid.
The thing is, yes, we have an infrastructure, and here's the thing, right? You can be a police officer, I think, in 2 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you have the details on that. But I know that it takes a lot less time to become a police officer than other places in the world. Mm-hmm. A lot of places takes like 4 years, and it's like intensive training, like a lot of like just just responding to crises and like understanding how to like de-escalate and things like that. That's not really in our system right now. So if we were going to expand the budget, I want racial bias training. I want oversight. I want accountability. I think one of the things that I think should go is qualified immunity. If you're a cop and you kill someone unjustly, you should be able to get sued and lose your job.
Sure.
Absolutely. That seems like common sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I wanted to make that statement.
Yeah. No, and I agree with that. And I think one thing I do feel was unfortunate, especially when things were really heated with the George Floyd and everything, is there was a lot of police videos that like came out on Twitter and stuff. And, obviously it's awful to see. Yeah. But I think one thing I felt so bad about is a lot of things didn't have the full context either.
Right, yeah.
And,
as a lot of things.
Yeah. You see that a lot in the media. And I think I felt bad because a lot of cops were probably painted as racist, awful people who murder black people when it was totally out of context, and they didn't, it could have been hours leading up to that moment,
Absolutely. And I don't, I agree with that. And I think the same thing with, I know I've personally been quick to be like, oh, that person is clearly, making fun of like black people, or that person clearly, like there was one video, I don't know what the kid's intentions really were, but he was like laughing at this like Native American doing some tribal thing. He was wearing a MAGA hat. I don't know if you remember this.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
But I saw that, and I was, like, immediately reactionary, and I was like, this dude's racist. He's just, like, smiling at this person that just, that's protesting for their civil rights, whatever. But, yeah, I think everyone has a tendency to do that, and as someone that, I regard myself as a rational person, I try to take that out of the equation as much as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think demonization and jumping to conclusions is absolutely not the way to go.
Yeah.
Context is everything. So
totally.
Yeah.
And I want to keep going, but I also want to make this point that hopefully the people listening or watching can see is that, with how polarized things are, obviously, Trevor, you're very progressive, and I think I've obviously leaned more conservative, but when you hear out and you're not just like pointing fingers and saying how wrong people are, a lot of these ideas can make sense.
Yes.
And there's so much of social media, you see it's all just passive aggressive. We're better. You guys are crazy. We're right.
Yes. Yep.
And I hate that, bro. Because I think people think that all conservatives and all people, all right wing, all left wing, they're everyone who identifies are extreme.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not that way, right. But it's so much that if you identify, you're automatically.
Dude, it makes me sad because I know my own primal instincts. Like sometimes I can get to a mindset where I'm like, oh, I don't want to associate with like conservatives, like, and people that like I genuinely care about, like you and like my friend Katie Graydon, who's really great.
Sure.
Where it does affect me, and I'm just like, you can't think like that. You cannot let it get to the point where you're just like, yeah. And the thing is, there's 72 million people that voted for Trump. We have minds to change. Sorry, like the left has its work cut out for them.
Yeah.
So I just think it's ridiculous. But I think Republicans, as far as like the echo chambers, media bias is something that I'm really scared about, like on the right. There's some things with the QAnon stuff, with the like not wearing masks, like perpetuating lies about, like either side's like, Biden's a pedophile or, Trump's a pedophile.
See,
Stop with this like crazy, like, I just don't understand this thought process.
No, I've honestly been a bit turned off from politics from a social media standpoint.
For your mental health, it's rational.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just because it's like everything is just trying to paint the picture of I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah.
What with whatever side you're on, there's no rational conversation. It's just beating each other on the head. No one's going to listen to each other, and it's just going to reinforce your own beliefs. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that, the thing that really opened my eyes was the Social Dilemma documentary.
Yeah.
Because I'd always known that like
social media is an outrage machine. Sorry to, it's an outrage machine. But yeah. Continue.
Yeah. But it's just like. It opened my mind to how much it's just reinforcing beliefs and giving you what you want. It's not like it's a rational machine saying, hey, look, there's these two sides to the idea, and make a choice. It's just going to show you what you're most likely to look at for the most amount of time.
Right. And
Yeah. And I think what's hard is it's like, well, I'm seeing all this conservative stuff and thinking all these liberals are crazy. A bunch of liberal people are seeing this stuff and thinking all the conservatives are crazy. You know what I mean? It's just perpetuating this ideology when it's like when people like you and me just sit down and talk and not like to batter each other, but just to like hear ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can find a lot of common ground.
Yeah, for sure.
But which drives me nuts. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. We can still keep going, but...
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
But hopefully the people listening and watching can see that it's like not every person on either side is crazy and extreme.
What I want to say.
Everyone's rational.
And I think both sides do this, but I've been really frustrated and frankly disappointed with a lot of people that, in my extended family especially, that will post stuff, be like, yeah, like go challenge your bias. When I post things like, hey, Republican friends, like what do you listen to? What are you watching? I go and I'll watch the content. But those people that have hold these like kind of ideas for so long, especially when you get older, and I don't blame them. Like, you get to a point where you're like, yeah, this is what I believe. I'm not going to change for anything, which I think is completely detrimental, and I don't think you should get complacent whatsoever. But with that being said, is like, I get frustrated with people on the right when they say that they're like, when I'm having discussion, and they're like, well, they're like, yeah, I just disagree with that. But then no substantive discussion after that. Why do you disagree with what I'm saying? Do you have a rebuttal? Have you seen content? Like, that frustrates me like beyond belief, dude. Is like, how many people that I really like, I do respect and I want the best for them, and for them to like open their mind, like, how much of those people, like, when I talk to them, are actually going to go and watch like some leftist video or like try to see it from the other side? And I'm sure like the right can say the same thing, but personally, that's how I felt. Is I felt like really gaslighted by some Republicans regarding that situation.
And I think the key is like a lot of people tend to get very defensive, and they don't want to listen. Especially if they feel like their beliefs are getting like attacked.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's the wrong kind of conversation you should have, because then nobody's listening to each other, and that's where arguments happen. I had another thought. I just forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, no doubt, dude. There's a lot of issue in communication regarding politics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, nuts. Well, dude, there's we got a couple minutes left. Okay, one of the last topics I wanted to talk about, because I know it's been on my mind a lot, is healthcare. I think that would be important to talk about, because I know there's, there could be some things changing with it, right? Moving away from like private healthcare and stuff. So, what are your thoughts, or what makes you passionate about that? I know that's one of the things you wanted to talk about.
I think what public sector healthcare signifies to the American people is saying that we care about your health over anything else. If anything, that message sends it clear to people that, like, hey, you're in this country, we're going to take care of you. You're participating in this society, we're going to take care of you. Because here's the thing, like, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot is, when people are like, healthcare isn't a right, like, why do you say healthcare is a right? Healthcare is a right is because you're participating in the society. You could go and leave the society, go out in the woods, whatever, and not pay taxes, whatever, find your own medicine. But people choose to stay here because they want, like, the social fabric, whatever. But if we're going to work for these companies, if we're going to be patriotic, we deserve healthcare. I mean, we are the only civilized, like, first world country that doesn't provide health care. And I think as soon as we solve that mental health crisis, the more we begin to communicate, the more we begin to solve these underlying issues.
Totally.
Because I think that's the biggest thing, dude, is like me going to like therapy. Like, I'll be very honest, like 8th grade, like, was a very hard time for me. But there was a paradigm shift as soon as I hit 9th grade when I like went to therapy. And I was like, oh, there's a different way. I understand how my mind works now. Like, I understand, like,
you're not just taking pills.
You're not taking pills. Like, I mean, I take pills. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. Like, I have a like literal chemical imbalance that I need to take care of. But you can't just do that. There's a reason why it's therapy and medicine.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people have not explored their own consciousness and like really dealt with their trauma. And I think people are projecting onto each other. And I think there's generational trauma. I mean, I see my parents that are kind of like this Stockholm syndrome of like, it's like, you just want the government to take care of you because you want free healthcare. I'm like, no, I want you to get help too. Like, this affects everyone. Like, and as soon as we fix this problem, the better we're going to be, and the more we can move on. As a society.
Right.
But sorry, to get more into more like substantive stuff, like.
Well, can I ask this?
Yeah.
Because I know, because I agree with what you say. I think we should take care of people. I know growing up in the middle class, I mean, my dad's worked for healthcare, his whole career, so we've always had good coverage, and my family's been blessed. So my anecdotal experience, growing up in the middle classes, I haven't had an issue getting health
Right,
care and
yeah.
being taken care of. But I know there's, millions of people who don't get what they need, or forgo doctor visits when they need it. So I can see the need for more people to get health care. I know one of the arguments I've heard, and that I'm just genuinely curious to explore, is that when it's available to everyone like that they're more particular on like who gets what treatment, or like there's longer wait lines, if that makes sense.
So this is something that I did like a research thing for my English class.
Sure.
I was like, okay, this argument keeps getting, this is just like such a right-wing talking point of like, it's ineffective, blah, blah, blah. But actually, when I started doing the research, is that I found that the public sector, more efficient, like faster service, and that's not across the board. But even if it was the case that people had to wait a little bit longer, I'd rather wait a little bit longer than have people unnecessarily die. Because people have their insurance tied to their employment. If you lose your job, you lose your health insurance. And why do you lose your job? You might have a mental health problem. You might have a substance abuse problem. You might have a domestic abuse situation. All of those things warrant help, and it provides all of that is very traumatic, and it impacts your ability to do work. And so, as soon as you solve those issues, the faster people can get back on their feet. But as far as the waiting times, like I said before, like when I was looking at it, there were studies in Africa, there were studies in Canada, blah, blah, blah. The only thing that they saw was like a slight uptick in like people being less personable in the public sector. Because like private sector, like people don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
So they have to have a level of being nice, right?
Yeah.
So I think the idea that that the public health care is gonna have a little bit more waiting time. It might be true in some places, but I think there's plenty of organizers that can make it more efficient. I think we have the willpower to do
Sure,
that.
and I think it is complex. And I know, like, just anecdotal experience, like my grandma lives in Canada, right, and just had a big health issue with her heart and stuff.
Yeah.
And she was fortunate to get taken care of,
Yeah.
and I think it was a blessing because I don't know exactly how pensions and things work or if she would have been taken care of regardless, but I know it was a blessing because she didn't have to pay for any of it.
Right. And how much would you spend here?
Yeah, it would have been
a fortune.
Pretty penny if you didn't have insurance, for sure.
Just to give you a scope of how ridiculous healthcare administration is like getting a private room costs like $500 more than getting like
in a hospital.
In a hospital,
yeah.
like if you have a shared room, it's far less. But if you have a private room, it's like $500 more. A ride in the ambulance is like $1,000 to $2,000.
Yeah,
that's insane. That's insane, and that's just like you didn't like want to get hurt. It's not like your fault if you have a heart attack. You gotta take care of your health.
Yeah.
People take care of your health, okay?
Yeah.
But like, come on, like no one should be paying that amount of money, and no one should be going bankrupt because they have a medical emergency. It's just ridiculous.
Totally, man. Well, dude, I think we're about out of time here. As far as, is there anything you want to shout out, or are there things that are good places people could go? I think if anything, like we've said multiple times, I think we've had a good discussion just rationalizing these ideas. What's a good source of information that you found?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked.
Explore more of these ideas.
I'm glad you asked. There's a few people that I really enjoy reading or listening to. One person that I love is David Pakman. He's a social democrat. So he's like pro-capitalism, but he's also a big fan of like a lot of the like subsidized programs in Europe and stuff like that. Great source of information. Rising is really great. You have Sager and Jetty. Sager and Jetty. He is like a Republican. And then you have Crystal Ball, who's a Democrat, and they both do analysis, and it's kind of like a moderated thing because they both they they hash out ideas, but one of the like threads between both of them is the fact that the like working class is being exploited.
Sure.
And it's really powerful because I think if people like understood just that on a financial level, that it's in their best interest to like have, like some of the policies Democrats are advocating for, the more I think people would lean more to the Democratic Party instead of the Republican Party. So that's great. Rising, David Pakman. I would say Sam Cedar. It's the Majority Report with Sam Cedar is really great.
Okay.
And then Economic Update. That's a socialist network, and Jacobin is a socialist network. But I do enjoy some of their content as well. So.
Cool. Well, maybe what we can do, man, because I'm all about helping people see both sides. For those who are listening, we're also going to be having an audio version of this on YouTube. So maybe what we can do is if you wanted to send me a couple links or different books, I can put those in the description and they can check it out. But Trevor, it's been a pleasure, my friend. It's been fun having you on. You've always been a good friend. So we'll have to do it again sometime.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Shout out Mitch. Subscribe.
Peace out, everybody. Sweet, dude.
I was trying to unpack so much at the beginning, and I know you were like, dude.